sorry, I have to move. All right, we're all set? All right, well, thank you all for coming. Many of you have been asking questions about our water leak that took place back in July. First and foremost, we want the public to know that absolutely no cases have been compromised by this water leak. This was a simple situation where water leaked on evidence. The evidence was removed and repackaged. And once again, no cases were compromised. In order to ensure that we were transparent as possible, we notified our partners at the county attorney's office to make sure that they were aware of what exactly took place. Evidence from approximately 1,000 cases were removed from the area. Out of these, approximately 150 of them were impacted by the leak, and less than 20 of them, or 20 of those were either homicide or sexual assault cases. So the leak itself happened on July 12th, 0200 hours, so 2 a.m. in the morning. One of the officers that was working came in to log some property, noticed there was some water. So obviously none of the people from the property room were here at that time. They contacted our facilities right away. They came out, started working on it. And what it turned out to be is this is a line that's connected to our air conditioning system. So it's fresh water that leaked. And basically just like you see above us with the tile roofs, it's piping that's above those the tile ceiling. And the water leaked from there and dropped down below. Actually, if Gina wants to pull up some of those pictures real quick, I kind of show you.
And all of these will be emailed to you.
So that's the actual property room right there where we log in the evidence. They go into a locker, and that later goes to the property room, which is on the other side. That's the actual property room, and you kind of start seeing some of the shelving where some of those items of evidence were at. And you can see the hole in the roof. I believe that's where the leak actually came from. You can see a little bit of the water damage on some of the shelves. And again, some more of the water damage. And we do have a little video here at the end that just kind of shows a little bit of the property room itself. This is something that was actually produced prior to this incident. Those will be some of the lockers that they get stored in. Now that's from the other side is where the officers log in. They log it into that locker, and that cage is where they pull it out of. Obviously, we have some biological storage area. So when we talk about sexual assault cases, do keep in mind that sexual assault kits are kept in refrigerated areas, so those would not be included in this items of evidence. And again, that's of one of our property rooms where we log in the evidence. So just give you those pictures just so you have those available if you need them for anything, to kind of get a visual of what the water leak and how it came down from the roof and actually onto property. A lot of our evidence is actually going to be logged into manila envelope like this. If it can fit in this, generally that's what it's going to be logged into. And those are placed on the shelves. Sometimes if it's a big case, they'll put it in boxes, which in this case there were a few boxes that had water damage. So once we found out there was a water leak, we removed against about 1,000 items, or 1,000 items of evidence from different cases. So those items were removed, and then we went through those to see which ones were damaged, which ones showed water damage or not. I mean, some of the damage was just on the very corner of the envelopes. If it did appear that it was going to affect it, those were dried and just left. Anything else was actually brought out, repackaged, and in some cases, again, especially when you look at homicide cases, sexual assault cases, we would take those out if it's, say, a shirt or something like that that may have evidence on it, or blood or DNA or something like that. Those items were taken out, again, dried, and then repackaged. So, I mean, this is actually something that could happen any day. Obviously, we don't get a lot of rain here in Phoenix, but if there was a situation where we had a scene out in the rain, no different than if rainwater got on it. We were able to take all that information, again, about 20 cases total with homicide, which we were concerned. Now, some of those cases are also retention cases, which means they were already resolved, but obviously we keep those things up to 199 years. Most of the cases, though, that we went through, again, actually all the cases, there was no concern that we had as far as affecting any overall of the case going forward. Again, it's just some water that got onto it. We were able to dry it in a drying room. It was a lot of work. Obviously, the officers took it out, took everything out, and when they do that, the other thing that they do is document everything as far as chain of custody. So we have to document that we removed the items, what we did with them, repackaged it, the new numbers that they were repackaged and so forth, and repackaged it into property room again. And that pretty much took care of all the items of evidence that were contaminated. Again, no overall effect. It was just a lot of work in getting this done. I know some people have asked questions about it, but I don't want it to get blown out of proportion. This was simply just taking the items out, making sure that they're dry, putting them back in, and then really that was it. It was a lot of work, obviously, but overall effect on the cases, we just don't believe there'll be any effect on any ongoing cases.
How can you guarantee and say that there was no cases that were infected or that evidence was affected on future cases?
Yeah, so all of our detectives, obviously, that especially homicide detectives, are very seasoned. They've been to court trials. They know what happens in court trials because that's ultimately where it would end up. They're not concerned about anything. They've talked to the county attorney. There was no concerns that were relayed to us about that. Could something get argued later? That's up to a defense or something like that to argue anything like that. But as far as our detectives that were involved in that, do not believe that that's going to cause any issues going forward.
Did any of the items have some type of DNA evidence, and had that DNA evidence already been extracted?
Yeah, so there were some items of DNA that did have DNA evidence on it, such as probably, and I don't know the exact, I believe it was blood. But keep in mind, when we do a swab on something like that, one, we take a controlled sample, and then we take a testing sample. So those samples are separated. So either which way, we at the very least still have that control sample that could be used and needed as evidence.
And what type of evidence are we talking about? I know you mentioned a shirt, but what other types of things did you say?
I don't know all the exact ones. I did talk to the detective. He mentioned clothing, and a lot of times if we have a homicide case or something like that, obviously sexual assault, clothing is something that we take. I know there was some ammunition, which obviously in cases like the ammunition, it's not affected at all. So, but the only thing that they were really spoke about was the clothing, that they really had a concern, is at least to make sure that was dry. Now the concern going forward would be any type of contamination as far as like molding. So that's why we assured that everything was dried. And not only did they take the item of evidence and repackage it, they also repackaged the original package and put that as an evidence too, to show exactly what happened to it. So that way that chain of custody is consistent from the time it was logged in to wherever it might go.
Did you guys notify any of the possible victims in the cases that were somehow in any way, evidence?
Right, and that would be up to the individual detectives if they had any concerns over the cases, but again, there was no concerns that we're aware of.
When was the county attorney's office notified?
The exact date, I don't know, but I know it was very shortly after the water leak.
And I know this issue was brought up in a bond meeting. Are there concerns with the current state of that storage room and efforts to update it?
I mean, as we know, this building is, I think, was built in like 1989. So we're, 30, just like a house that's 35 years old, things get older, they start to break. I can tell you we are looking to get a new building that would include the property room and our forensic unit and a crime lab. So that is something that would happen. Obviously, when we built this building in 1989, we didn't have all the items of retention that we needed to have at the time in the way that we have it now. And as the city continues to grow, caseload continues to grow, that property room is getting very full.
Was all protocol followed when storing all of this evidence?
Are you talking about originally or afterwards?
Originally.
Yeah, there was no problems with it originally. Originally, it was logged in, again, different cases over different periods of time. They get logged into a locker, the property room. The people working in the property room will take that from the locker into the room, and then they log it in as being in the property room, and then exact location of where those items are at.
In the meantime, there's special steps being taken to help protect it more, like, learning from an accident or whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the building configuration, obviously we fixed the leak and there's new piping in there. So we don't have any reason to believe that that's going to cause a problem in the future.
And just to make sure, this was only the property room, right? It didn't affect the forensic lab or anything else that you guys have here?
Correct. So the property room and the room where the officers log in the property, which is connected.
I know you kind of already hit on it, but I think people hear cases, especially with sexual assaults, are impacted. It's not the sexual assault kits. Can you talk a little bit about those storage process?
Yeah, so the sexual assault kits actually get stored in refrigerators. So that is a separate location, completely unaffected by this area where the water leak was at.
Did this affect the timetable to any cases? Did this, set back any hearings or investigations?
No, there was no effect on anything coming up. As of this time, any of the evidence that had water leak, there's no pending court cases at this time for any of those cases. So there was nothing that was delayed. All right.
I have a question on something unrelated. I'm not sure if you could speak on this, but if you could confirm if the lead detective on the Alicia Navarro case was reprimanded at all, and if so, for what?
So we did have some information. Obviously, that's separate. I was working with Channel 3 on that through a public records request, so I still have to fulfill that. But I can tell you, as far as the Alicia Navarro case, it's an open investigation. So at this time, we want to make sure that we remain the safety of that investigation going forward. So we're just not talking about the investigation itself. All right.
Are the Diamondbacks going to win today?
About 30 minutes, I hope so. All right, I appreciate it. Thank you.
You figured it was a lot easier to have you guys all here at the same time asking the questions so that nobody was getting one piece of information different than the other. But this really was not